everyone.
Well, welcome everyone. It looks like we've got plenty of folks joining us today. My name is Katy Stevens. I lead the Asia Pacific business at CultureAmp, and I'm joined by my colleague Ginny Fry, who is my literal people partner in crime, helping me with all people, culture, team related matters for the CultureAmp employees we call campers here in Asia Pacific. And today we're going to spend time with you talking through how CultureAmp, both internally and externally, is working to create a better world of work through culture. I'm going to share with you 6 sort of key pillars underpinning how to be really deliberate and intentional about designing culture and how to nurture the norms that are foundational to culture too. I'm going to share lots of really practical examples with you from what we do within CultureAmp, and we'll do that for the first 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. A couple of housekeeping pieces. There's a chat function that you can use to chat amongst yourselves, but if there is a question that you'd like addressed at any time in the session, you can drop it into the Q&A. Ginny will be moderating the Q&A, and we'll get to those questions in that last segment. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land that I'm joining you from today, and pay respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So I should start by telling you a little bit about myself and why on earth I get to be schooling you on how to create a culture-first organisation. I, for many years, have been a student of organisations who are working to craft and evolve their culture. For the last 10 years, I've actually been working in technology companies that themselves create products to help organisations become better workplaces, but also to do the work on themselves to be great places to work. In the last 5 years, I've been at CultureAmp, and in those 5 years, I've become a leader of this fast growth culture first company, which has given me a front row seat and some really hands-on practical experience in how to take the intentions of creating a really productive, really wonderful people-centric culture and turn that into reality, and to do that not as an alternative, but as a means to organizational success, to growth, to global domination. And to tell you a little bit about CultureAmp, if you are not familiar with us, we were founded around 10 years ago here in Melbourne, in Australia. And for the last 8 years or so, we've been working really around this mission that you can see before you here. So how we want to impact the world is to specifically create a better world of work by amplifying the experience and the impact of over 100 million people, or about 1% of the world's population, at work. We're a very mission-driven organisation, and as you'll see in a minute, we actually create the tools to allow other organisations to put their people and their culture first as they're seeking to fulfil their own organisational missions. I mentioned we create technology, and the work that we're doing, we use we're developing this technology platform that we use to drive that change. And very specifically, the ways that we do that are that we make it easier to collect data across the employee experience. We combine that data to deliver insight, and we use that insight drawn from the data to actually drive positive behavior change. This is a really important piece because I think there are obviously lots of organizations in the world who are really great at collecting data of all kinds, visualizing them, drawing out insights. Something that we hold really dear is that all that data and all that insight ultimately doesn't lead to much if we don't actually give people the means to take action, to change behaviors at the individual, the team, and the organizational level, because we want to do this for all people and in all companies globally. We currently work with around 3,000 organisations globally. And even though we're founded here in Melbourne, Australia, actually much of our business is outside Australia. So we have offices in Melbourne, not that we're here at the moment, obviously, also in San Francisco, in New York and London. And we have around 450 employees globally distributed to working with those 3,000 organisations. You can see from the numbers here that we have a really significant data lake. You know, there's lots and lots of insights and expertise and feedback that we've gathered and are able to use in our platform. We've surveyed more than 3 million employees. They've answered more than 163 million questions. And you can see here just a sample of some of the great organizations that we work with. Importantly, we don't only work with Silicon Valley tech unicorns, although they actually were where we got a lot of our early traction. Today, we're working with organizations, working with government, we're working with utility companies, we work with the whole gamut of industries and in lots of parts of the world. To give you a sense of like, what is this thing that Culture Amp does? We really focus on sort of two key means of gathering that data to drive behavior change. So you'll see here this sort of organizational insight. So things like engagement surveys, life cycle and pulse surveys, getting feedback and taking action around belonging and inclusion, as well as things like organizational response to things like COVID, and how your people are doing and taking care of their well-being and what you can do to support them. We also take it really seriously to empower and support individuals and teams. So we focus on performance, and that includes things like performance reviews, but also continuous feedback and 360 feedback, those things that are really key in helping individuals develop and grow, and helping people align their performance with the goals that are important for them and having an impact in their role and for the organization. 3,000 companies all around the world. Lots of them come to us because we are this very progressive and a very idealistic organization that talks a lot about putting culture first. We work with these organizations, some of whom are really the gold standard for culture first organizations, and many of whom are somewhere on that journey. So we get sort of a front row seat to what it looks like to be nailing it and what it looks like to be a work in progress. So a lot of what I share with you today is things that we've put into practice also just from being inspired by the companies that we work with. I've used this phrase culture first a few times now, so I want to take a minute to tell you what that means. At the heart of culture first organizations is really a commitment to people, to amplifying what people are capable of and being and achieving. And the thing that we hold to be really dear is that being a culture first organization is not an alternative to being a successful organization out in the market. That being culture first, focusing on what people can be and achieve, is actually a means to achieving that success. And I shared with you our kind of external and global mission before, but we also have this personal mission, which is to sort of be an example of that kind of organization. To be one of these success stories, an Australian success story, who's done that by really focusing on people and on culture. Culture is also really inextricably tied to your brand. So this is something that I've heard one of our founders and our CEO, Didier Elzinga, say many, many times, and I think it really helps to bring this to life. The brand is a promise you make to a customer, and culture is how you deliver on that promise. So your brand really tells your customers in the market, what can they expect from you? What are you going to deliver for them? What value? And how can they hold you to account? But if you don't have the culture that actually supports that, it's a fairly empty promise. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today, you can really adapt to your own organization and your own brand and think, what is the culture that we want to create that actually allows us to deliver on the brand promise that we make? You can see here several hundred of mine and Ginny's colleagues. This was from February last year, Ginny, I think, a time obviously when we could all be within 6 feet of each other. We brought our campers, Culture Amp employees, together to the Yarra Valley in the outskirts of Melbourne to work on our strategy, our culture, our teamwork. We had a hackathon where we produced both ideas for our product and our customers, but also ideas for our culture. And I just wanted to give you a little visualization of what a culture first company can look like, and one of the ways that we've sought to bring people together around a mission, and continue to invest and evolve what we are doing as a culture. I'm going to share with you kind of 6 key pillars that I think about when I think about culture, and culture specifically being about this nexus between very intentional design, but also nurturing the norms that can emerge and evolve off the back of that very intentional design. So being values led is something that's really important to us at Culture Amp. I'm going to give you some really practical examples of how we use values as a really foundational piece of our culture work, and specifically how you can bring values to life inside your organization so that they're not just words on a wall that people walk past. Designing your organization, how you structure your teams, your reporting structure, all of these things are really, really critical to bringing your culture to life. And they also allow you to be really deliberate about how you align to specific outcomes, whether they be culture outcomes and or growth outcomes. How you measure performance and how you reward people to drive behaviors, also really, really important and often understated. I'm going to talk to you about some of the ways that we do that at Culture Amp. How you use your strategy and priorities to help people focus on what matters, and how you do that by thinking about both culture and growth at the same time. How you would address some of the gaps you have in the organization and to grow people with a really specific approach to talent and hiring. And then also how you keep checking in. Culture is never done, so you need to keep getting feedback, you need to be iterating, you need to be hearing from people about whether your intentions are meeting their expectations and their reality. So before we start on talking about values, I'd love if you'd jump into the chat, take a moment to think about, my cat is coming here for a visit, how an organization either that you work for now or one you've worked for recently, and maybe share some of the organizational values you can remember. As you're doing that, I want you to think about how often you might have encountered the exact same set of values, or at least some of them at multiple workplaces. I think I've probably worked at a few where integrity and customer focused appeared, and they're really, really important principles. And they're also very general, very broad, and lack the specificity that allows people to really genuinely connect with them. So hopefully you're having a chance to kind of reflect and think about what values can be in an organization. Hopefully some of you have worked in an organization where the values really did connect with you. But I want to talk to you about how values are so foundational to a culture first organization, how we focus on shaping them to build that foundation, but then we also need to be really cognizant of how our values shape us, our behaviors, those kinds of things. So some advice and some examples based on what we do at Culture Amp around values. So one important piece is to craft your values early. Don't leave it to when you're 100 people, but at the same time also don't feel like you need to craft them when it's just you and your co-founder. You need to do it when you do have a small collection, hopefully of diverse voices, so that then as new people come into the organization, you have that as a foundation and a framework for people to connect to. I mentioned before about, values in a lot of organizations can be very broad. and they can use language that is really lacking specificity. The more specific you can be, the more people can connect with them. And I'm going to share with you the values that we have at Culture Amp. And hopefully you've worked at organizations where you've had ones as specific too. But the three values that our founders crafted along with a handful of early employees were the three that you see in the list here. So have the courage to be vulnerable, learn faster through feedback, and trust people to, at that time it was make decisions. We had three values for a really long time. And when I joined the company, these were the values that we had, and I connected with them immediately. And what I saw was these behaviors being modeled by leaders and colleagues all around me. So our founders, more than anything else, I think were really, really great bastions of these values and helped me to make the leap between what does this value mean and what are the behaviors that come out of it. It's really, really important that as leaders and early employees or founders of a startup that we're constantly checking ourselves and making sure to model the behaviors that are aligned with these values. You also want to be able to adapt as your company evolves. And a demonstration of that is the last value you see listed below here, amplify others, which was a late entrant into Culture Amp's values. So probably about 2 years ago, a group of employees sort of approached our founders and suggested that while they loved the three values that we had, they thought that there might be something, a fourth value or a hidden value that we hadn't actually codified yet. We had a series of workshops. We invited all employees to participate, and out of that, we articulated this fourth value of amplify others, which was something that with all of these, there's an internal to the organization and an external component. And this one, I think, is one that, especially for the people that helped to craft it, became something really dear to them. And this was an example of us and our founders specifically being open to adapt as the company evolves and grows. One specific piece of advice that I think we've taken on board, even over the last year or two, is to help people, especially as you grow and if you're growing fast, to bridge that gap between the values and the behaviors that they see around them. So something that we've done is to codify what are the golden behaviors associated with this value and what are the shadow behaviors, so that as you're giving people feedback, as you're checking your own behaviors and your own actions and your own decisions, you've got really tangible examples of like, what is a really positive golden demonstration of have the courage to be vulnerable, and what does it mean to either take it too far or to invert it or take it in the negative. So these are example of Culture Amp's values. They're pretty specific. They're really specific to us. They have kind of a poetry to them, which helps people to reflect and connect. And I would say Culture Amp is probably the first organization I've worked at where I hear people invoke the values in a meeting. So I might be in a meeting with the rest of my leadership team in APAC, and we might be banding about a particular decision that needs to be made. And someone will inevitably speak up and say, okay, who do we need to trust to make and own this decision? And being guided by our values just to help actually drive our actions and behaviors is really important, and it happens all over the organization. So I think that it's a really nice demonstration of values that really connect with people and that they can use to make decisions and to act and to behave. So that's a really foundational piece, the values that you craft and that you adapt and evolve over time. How you design your organization, how your teams work together, your reporting structure is really critical in making sure that you're getting the outcomes that you want, both from a culture side and from a growth side. This picture here, it's not just a stock photo from some cute website. It's actually a few members of my team here in APAC. And I'm going to explain to you in a minute some of the team structure that we have that allows salespeople and customer success coaches and people scientists to be working side by side in cross-functional teams around common goals. This is a very intentional decision that we made early on, the founders in the organisation, which I'll talk to you about. Again, I'm using this word a lot, but you should really be intentional about the outcomes that you want and then work backwards from there in terms of what structures for your team and for your reporting lines you want. I think it's very natural and it feels like a nice shortcut to either just adopt something that you've used or seen work well in another organization, or to be excited by some novel team structure that you've read about in Harvard Business Review, maybe. But the truth is, you need to be really clear about what you're trying to achieve with how you set your teams up. So starting with the outcome you want and then working out what are the team structures and how do people work together to achieve that is really, really critical. It also allows you to do the second piece, which is to experiment with teams and structures. You don't want people to get whiplash from constantly changing how you structure your organization. But if you're really specific and intentional about what outcome you're trying to drive, and then you can talk to them about why we think this particular team structure or this org design principle is going to help us achieve that, you're going to take people along on the journey and you're going to be given permission to sort of adapt and experiment when you need to. If your outcomes shift, if you move from a stage where it's all just about shipping product as quickly as possible to something else, then be willing to adapt. Don't be too fixed in the org design principles that you use, but always be grounded in the business outcomes and the cultural outcomes you're looking for. In terms of how we do this at Culture Amp, cross-functional teams are actually really core to how we work. They don't exist in every part of the organization. They started in our product group, which now consists of a series of camps who are smaller cross-functional teams working on common problem spaces. But we also have them on the customer side as well, which is where I can speak with more specificity. So we actually have cross-functional customer teams where salespeople work alongside customer success coaches and people scientists and account managers to collectively attract, win and retain customers in a particular part of the market that they're working in. And we chose that because the founders really wanted to design for adaptability at the team level, even over efficiency. The other thing that we expected to come out of this was that an adaptable team, the whole bunch of different skills who had a common goal, would also deliver a better customer experience. And that's absolutely been our result, where we have really, really strong customer advocacy, really, really high customer retention. And I believe much of that is due to these cross-functional teams who are really, really adaptable and really motivated by a shared goal, even while they have individual accountability as a salesperson, as a customer success person, as a people scientist. One of the other, maybe this wasn't intentional, this might have been a serendipitous side effect, was that we actually found people working in those cross-functional teams also get the benefit of learning and have growth opportunities every day just by actually working alongside people who are doing really different kinds of roles, but to a common goal. Another example of some sort of org design principles that help support and bolster our culture is that our managers, we call them mentors, and it's more than just a cute rebrand. Very specifically, we made that choice a few years ago because we wanted anyone who managed people to have a lot of clarity that the thing that they need to do alongside helping support people's work is to help grow and develop these individuals, to help them take charge of their career. It's not just about doing it for people, but that kind of growth and that kind of development would be really, really core to the role of a manager at Culture Amp. And in each group, customer, product, org are our three big groups inside Culture Amp. We also have a cross-functional growth team. So that cross-functionality that helps us be adaptable, that helps us spot opportunities that might fall between the cracks of a particular role or function, are overseen by a cross-functional leadership group as well. So there are a few examples of how we think and have made org design decisions specifically to bolster some of those parts of our culture that are really important to us. I talked before about how you reward and recognize people, how you judge performance, is quite often overlooked as being really, really critical to culture. But I want to spend some time talking to you about why it's so important. You don't want to leave it too late. A lot of companies early on are not yet ready for a really mature performance reward and recognition approach. But I think if you at least realize how critical it is, you can make some smart decisions even early on. Because performance and rewards ultimately reinforce your culture. They do that by elevating and promoting and recognizing those people who either live your values or don't, or uphold your culture or don't. And they're the thing that people notice. If you see people promoted who are not upholding the culture, then I think it's fair to call out in the organization, are we really serious about this? In Culture Amp, we have a whole bunch of ways that we think about performance, rewards, recognition in terms of reinforcing our culture. One example is that we do twice yearly what we call performance syncs, which are performance reviews and evaluations. They look back, but they also look forward. And we have our mentors working with our campers, both to understand what was the impact that you had in the last 6 months, and what's the impact that you're looking to have and the organization is looking for you to have in the next 6 months. We have these performance dimensions. Obviously, outcome and impact is one of those things, but how someone lives our values and how they've grown are also really critical in that. And they're no less important than the impact. So making sure that our values and how someone is growing and developing are part of how someone's performance is assessed is a really specific way in which we make performance and rewards a critical part of our culture. In those twice yearly performance syncs, peer feedback is also really, really critical. So we don't ever have just a manager assessing the performance of somebody. That manager is really, really dependent on getting feedback from that person's peers, colleagues, people that they work with, who can give really specific and really actionable feedback. Yes, on the impact that they've had, how they've lived the values, how you've seen them grow. So we make sure that, that you get a really full picture of how someone has operated in that period of time. One always exciting thing to share is that Culture Amp, even though we're a high growth company, we have lots of salespeople all over the world, we offer no sales commissions. And that was a controversial but very impassioned decision that our founders made early on, because specifically they're interested in human behavior and what happens when you incentivize people to hit a number no matter what. In having no sales commissions, we've created a more collaborative rather than an internally competitive environment. And we've also ensured that there's a lot more alignment between people who are bringing in new business and those people who are nurturing and retaining the business as well. So that collaboration becomes possible because you don't have individuals who are incentivized with big pots of money to go out and sell at whatever cost. And then non-monetary rewards are really important too. One that I'm going to mention here is one that I've personally benefited from many times over, which is called our Coaching for Everyone program. And that basically means that everybody who's an employee of Culture Amp, whatever level that you're at, whatever tenure, is eligible to get a whole bunch of coaching sessions. We have panels that you can choose from, but ultimately the individual can choose what kind of coaching and for what purpose that they want it. We believe in coaching as a core leadership skill, but it's also something that people can just get a lot of benefit from. And so this is something that we devised and offered to our employees as an investment in them. I'm going to talk in a bit about our employee value proposition, but this really reflects our culture is one that's really based on people's ability to grow, to develop. We want to be somewhere that people come to grow and develop, and benefiting from coaching should be available to everyone, not just VPs, not just founders, not just execs. And so we always want to reward people with these kinds of these kinds of things that reinforce the culture that we're trying to build. Strategy, always important. What's really important and often overlooked is actually making culture part of your strategy. At Culture Amp, we have a culture strategy that sits alongside a growth strategy. And the way to think about that is our growth strategy is what we want to win, you know, over a period of time. And our culture strategy is how we want to win. So, you know, what's that culture that sits behind our brand that delivers on our promise? What's that culture that allows us to grow and to win in particular markets with particular problem spaces with particular products? In both our culture and our growth strategy, we outline, you know, what are the strategic themes? So for us, that means over the next, 6 months or so, what are the sort of key pillars that are going to allow us to really deliver on that strategy? We have critical metrics. So for our culture strategy, that includes things like, what's the variance in the employee experience, or for our case, the engagement, across the company based on different demographics? We want to shorten that variance as much as possible. We don't want people in one part of the company or in one demographic group inside Culture Amp having a wildly different experience to other people. And then we also have culture outcomes. So they're the sort of, on the growth side, we have the business outcomes that might be just like revenue. On the culture outcomes, that can be things like engagement. It can be things like regrettable turnover. And a really important part of the growth and the culture strategy is that leaders, everybody, but especially leaders, need to assume sort of 100% responsibility. So as I'm leading the APAC region for Culture Amp, I'm thinking about our culture strategy and what we need to do to deliver on that, as much as I'm thinking about how I grow the APAC book of business over the next year. So strategy being really important in like defining what's really paramount and important to the organization, and then also as a tool that actually helps you to clarify what are those keys to our success as an organization. Developing and hiring is obviously really, really important, because as you're growing really fast, you need to be thinking about how are you helping the people who are already there in the organization keep up, thrive, have even more impact, and also how do you attract the right people into the organization, and how do you make sure you do that in a way that doesn't create these adverse impacts down the line. And I'll tell you a bit what I mean about that. But I think, when people think about talent, they're often thinking about kind of building, buying, or borrowing. And when you're thinking about culture and being a culture first organization, something that we hold really dear and I think is really important to any culture first organization is to focus first on building the talent you have already. You can buy or borrow what you can't build, but can you develop someone internally who can grow into a specific role that you need in a reasonable time frame? And if so, showing a commitment to that really means a lot to people and is real evidence of being culture first and really walking the walk. When you are hiring or buying, when you're hiring talent, creating that headcount, bringing in someone new, something that is always a point of tension is that, for a long time people talked about hiring for culture fit. We need to hire someone who can hit the ground running, who's like us, who knows how to get things done inside our culture and our organization. But the truth is, when you do that, often without intending to, you are, with each hire, eliminating diversity. Not just diversity in a demographic sense, but also diversity of experience, diversity of thought. And so at Culture Amp, when we're hiring from outside and we're thinking about every person that joins us adding to and contributing to our culture, we're thinking about culture add. So yes, we want this person to thrive, to find a place at Culture Amp that can allow them to be impactful, that can allow them to grow, but we're not just looking for someone who just fits in and is just like us. So that's a really important thing, that as you're helping people in the organization to be part of hiring panels, it's really helping people get their head around this, so they're not just looking for people that like them to bring into the organization. I mentioned this idea before around walking the walk, and it's really important. This comes down to the performance and rewards piece as well, that you're developing and promoting leaders who are showing that culture is as critical as the business outcomes. So making sure that you're identifying those future leaders and potential leaders inside the organization, that you're advocating for them, that you're supporting them, and that you're giving them opportunities to demonstrate leadership. And when the opportunity comes, that you can actually promote them into more senior positions as those kinds of figureheads and role models for a leadership that takes culture as seriously as growth. From a different perspective, speaking of growth, one of the things that we try to do as much as possible is favour developing but also hiring people who have a growth mindset, even over having a perfect fit of skills and experience. Because in a fast growth organisation, or one that you hope will become fast growth, having people who can adapt, who maybe they can't do something now but they believe they can learn it, is going to set you up. And frankly, it's going to cost you less money because you're not going to have to be constantly hiring people in who are a right fit for the stage that you're at. So growth mindset is really, really important for us. And it comes through even in the products that we build. So our performance product and the continuous feedback tool that we have specifically uses the growth mindset vernacular of getting there, or kind of doing great or rocking it, as a way, not of saying this person is not good at this skill or they are. It's like they're still working on it. They're still learning. That idea around learning and growth is really important. And then thinking about how you attract the right people, right? Think about your employee value proposition. Why would someone come to work for you, especially if you're just building a company or in the early stages? What would attract them? What would make them want to take that risk? At Culture Amp, lots of different reasons, but one that really stands out to me is if we either want to be your dream job or the job that gets you your dream job. So the ability to grow and learn and get opportunities, whether it's through coaching for everyone, whether it's through the feedback culture that we have and the mentoring that you're going to get from your manager, that's a really key piece of why people come to join Culture Amp. And it's really important for every organization to work out what that is. And then finally, culture is never done. You need to be seeking feedback. Is the work that you're doing actually landing with people? Are you giving them what they need? Is your culture what you think it is? Do people understand the values? Do they feel that the leaders are living the values, are good role models for those values? So you need to get that feedback and then act on what you learn. So how we do that at Culture Amp, we drink our own champagne, obviously. This is the product that we make and that we deliver to our customers around the world. But you've got to collect feedback throughout this culture journey. You need to focus on understanding what matters most, not just where's the red, where's the green, but like what really matters for what you're trying to achieve at this point in time or over the next 12 months. After you've got that understanding, you need to act to specifically drive change, but also to build confidence in your organization that when people take the time to give that feedback, that you're going to take it on board and you're going to use it to help you make decisions, to help you reprioritize, and to just change their experience if it's one that needs to be changed. And then you need to do it again. So just to give you a demonstration of how we do this at Culture Amp. So we obviously use our own product. We run our own surveys. So twice a year we run, you might call it kind of a diagnostic deep dive to get a really, really complete picture of the full employee experience in every part of the organization. And then in the off quarters, we do these sort of themed check-ins. So it might be sort of the key engagement questions and some of the things that we acted on from last time, with also a belonging and inclusion focus or a well-being focus. So we're regularly checking in and asking people things, but we're not asking them the same thing every time. We're adapting it to what we need to inform the decisions that we make and the action that we take. We also thrive on this continuous peer-to-peer feedback. So it's pretty common. Maybe Ginny will do this for me after this session, that we'll jump into Slack, into Chrome, into Microsoft Teams, and the Culture Amp integration there will allow us just to, in the flow of work, send a little piece of feedback to our colleague. We use the SBI method of feedback, so situation, behaviour, impact, to really lower that fear of giving both reinforcing but also constructive feedback. And we do that all the time to create this culture of feedback. And very relevant to now is that we use feedback during uncertainty to actually really make sure that your culture can weather the tough times. It's tempting to kind of shut your ears and your eyes when you know things are rough, but the confidence that you can build in your people and the way that you will align them with your culture, if you're gathering feedback during times like now, is only going to reinforce and support your culture and help people to actually use that culture to navigate that kind of uncertainty. So they're the kind of 6 pillars that I think are really important for creating a culture first organization, being intentional in what you design and the norms that you're nurturing. So values are really, really foundational, and they can kind of make or break it in a lot of ways. How you design your teams and how people work together and being really specific about the outcomes you're going for makes a big difference in the culture that you're creating and that you're evolving over time. How you measure performance, how you reward people, how you use strategy and priorities to help people understand what is paramount and to elevate culture to the same level as growth and business outcomes is really important. The people that you nurture and grow, the people that you bring in to help add and evolve the culture and reinforce it is really important. And then making sure that you're always checking in and getting feedback and iterating where you need to. So that's the bulk of what I wanted to share with you today. Before we move on to Q&A, I wanted to share with you a few tips that a couple of our co-founders wished they had been given when they were starting out. So these are hopefully things that if you're really just getting started, you can keep in your mind as you're making decisions day to day about how to grow and create a culture first organization. So one important tip, find and hire people who are really deeply connected with your company mission, even over some of the specialist skills that you might want and need early on, because in those early days, that's going to help people weather a lot of what's going on. And it's also, if you're, promoting this growth mindset, going to create these very adaptable, very mission-driven, very committed employees who are going to see you through all the ups and downs. Once you've brought those passionate employees on board, and this is a sneaky little growth tactic, get them to speak at industry events, on webinars, wherever, they've got a mouthpiece, so that they can help you scalably find and attract more mission-based people to your organization. I talked before about defining your values early, but really being willing to flex and evolve as the company evolves and your culture emerges is important, especially if you're a founder. You really want to be seen as receptive and not too fixed in these things too. Design everything that you're doing for what you think you're going to need in 6 to 12 months, not just for what you need now. Undoubtedly, you're going to make plenty of mistakes. You're going to make plenty of wrong decisions, head down wrong paths. If you're building a culture where people are really clear and united on why the company exists, if you've really invested in hiring those mission-based folks and then nurtured them, then you're always going to have this light on the hill to plot these new paths forward. I would say during this kind of COVID time, that's been so clear to me in Culture Amp. I'm a leader who felt a really acute sense of responsibility in helping my teams know what to do when things got rough. And day after day and week after week, I saw people in my teams using that alignment with our mission and our purpose just to make really good decisions and just adapt really quickly on the fly without needing specific instructional guidance from leadership. And that proved to me, even above the fact that I already believed it, that being culture first, having a really clear mission and helping people align with it really gets you through both the good times and the bad. And then this last piece, which is really important, is that the best cultures aren't where everybody says they're always having a great time. The best cultures are where everyone is really painfully aware of where things could be better. They're really comfortable talking about it because they feel safe. And this is important too, they're committed to doing something about it, not just to pointing out the problem and expecting somebody else to fix it, but they're committed to actually doing something about it too. There are lots of resources that we produce based on our own experience and those of our customers. The Culture Amp blog is full of them, and I think Ginny is probably going to post in the chat, if she hasn't already, a link to some of those, and we'll also try to get those to you as a follow-up as well. But I think it's time to do some Q&A if we've had any questions. Ginny, what do you think? Did you find the mute button?
Yeah, I just can't get the mouse across to mouse across to unmute. We have had a few questions come through. So I think this one is a great one from Rebecca, who is asking a question around our values. And then how do you identify organizations that are serious about this as opposed to those who just talk about it?
Yeah, good question. I would say when I know that people are serious about their values is when they do attach promotion, remuneration, things like that, to whether people are being guided by the values in the work that they're doing. Because that's ultimately where things can fall down, because they can just become empty words on a wall if you don't also tie recognition and how people are promoted or awarded inside an organization based on their commitment and their demonstration of the values. That's definitely one way. I think there's all kinds of ways that it can go wrong, and all kinds of ways that that organizations can demonstrate their values. That's one for me. Ginny, what do you think? When you've worked at plenty of organizations.
Yeah, I think seeing them in onboarding as well, and a range of employees at all different levels of the organization being able to talk to them and provide examples of where they see them in practice. I mean, I just think to the one that I always go to, which is the courage to be vulnerable. And I see that play out in meetings all the time, where people use that value as a shield. They're a little bit nervous to speak up, to say something that might disagree with someone else, but they use it as a shield to say, in the essence of having the courage to be vulnerable, I just wanted to let you know. And so it's almost there as a protection or a shield, as I said. So yeah, I think onboarding is a really great place to start to embed them in your new employees. But also, if you're trying to work out, is it a company that does have them embedded, ask a range of employees the question.
That's a really good one. Yeah, I didn't actually mention this, but part of our new camper onboarding experience does include like just a whole range of activities around our values. And as Ginny said, like correct me if this is still, if this is not the case anymore, but like you actually have to go out and find like 2 or 3 different people in the organization and ask them about the values. So we don't game it too much by making sure that you only talk to your mentor or manager. But that's a really great example. It's like, yeah, is it something that you think is important enough that you want people to really connect with it in their first days and weeks? And how broad and deep is the ability for for individuals in the organization to really give tangible examples of these values in action?
Another question we had was around, what if you're in an organization where leadership refuses to spend time on creating values and doing the deep work around it to create a culture?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. It does have to come from the top as well. As with anything with leadership, the best advice you can often give to someone who's struggling with getting leaders on board is like, what actually matters to those individual leaders. Sometimes you have to chip away at them. Maybe they're under extraordinary pressure just to deliver results. And they think that values and culture are incidental. So I think trying to understand like those individual leaders who have influence, what matters to them, and is there a way that you can show this kind of evidence and examples of organizations that have made this investment and really got the business outcomes that they want as well. There are other ways, depending on the role you have in the organization, to chip away at it. It doesn't have to be that values come first. It's certainly great if you're building an organization from the ground up to be able to do that. That can be really foundational. but you can also be influencing really probably any one or multiple of those kind of 6 pillars, and be in a position to start to influence and create evidence inside the organization of why very people-centric, culture-first, even microcultures inside an organization are leading to business outcomes. I personally love telling that story even within Culture Amp, where in the APAC group, we have really successful business outcomes, and we really, really focus on our culture and our engagement, and those things go hand in hand. And so being able to find that evidence inside your organization to influence those leaders can be pretty powerful.
Thanks, Katie. Few more questions now flowing through, but I did like this one from an anonymous attendee who said, did I work with you at my last workplace? But I'm not sure who this is from because it just comes up as an anonymous attendee. So if that person wants to write in the chat who they are, we can try and answer that. Okay, Matt has asked, do you have any evidence on the effectiveness of coaching for everyone as a cultural benefit? I'm trying to convince our organisation that this is something that would help, and this would be something that would help sell the idea.
I reckon we would have some. I don't have it at my fingertips.
Yeah, I think we would, Matt. I have to go looking into the evidence, but I would say that the big benefit around offering a program like this is that you are approaching it for individuals. You know, you can very much bring in training around strategic thinking or presentation skills, or we could do training on Manager 101. But people have different leadership or different growth opportunities that they want to pursue at different times in their career. And so by having it coaching for everyone, it allows people to tackle it in the moment, a training that they would like to do. And the other thing that we do is that there's an investment from the employee as well. So if it's work related, Culture Amp will fund 90% of that training, and the individual will fund 10% of the training. And there's also another part to this program where it's personal learning. So if you want to go and do a meditation course, it's not something directly related to your work, but it's still something that will have an impact, then Culture Amp will fund 50% and the individual will pay the other 50%. So I think having this buy-in from the individual actually makes sure that they're got ownership in the decision that they want to go and do this training as well. So I don't have it with me, but I can go and look into it, and I can find your email address as an attendee and get back to you.
Find Ginny on LinkedIn, send her a message. And just to clarify, the training that Ginny was talking about is our other big kind of learning and development program called Learn Yourself Up, that sits alongside Coaching for Everybody, Coaching for Everyone. So we have that coaching program, and we also have this employee-led L&D program, which allows individuals to choose the training they want. And as Ginny said, have some skin in the game so that they're really going to pick something that's going to have an impact and put the investment into getting the benefit from it as well. Probably got time for maybe one or two.
My goodness, more. They're all coming through now. Most of the organizations don't use feedback from the subordinates to the manager. It's mostly manager to subordinate. So it becomes hard for employees to voice out. I'm not sure if that's a question or just a statement saying a lot of it's top down and not bottom up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that can be a perception and a practice that lots of organizations have. The way that we've frankly engineered our product at Culture Amp and all the coaching and the advice we give our customers is that if feedback isn't given and received freely, if it's not coming from all parts of the organization, then you're deaf and blind to a lot of what is happening inside your organization. So the organizations that we work with are absolutely committed to making feedback really key in the development of their culture, but also understanding things like the sort of business outcomes as well. So you do need to really prioritize on getting feedback, not only from managers, not only from leaders, but from people in all parts of the organization.
Thank you, Katie. There are a few more coming through. They're quite long, so I might we might stop here, and for all those that have sent them through, we'll make sure that we get back to you in the next 10 minutes or so, or send an email with some follow-up answers to your questions, but they're a little bit hard to answer in the moment here.
Yeah, and hopefully, if you do have something that you're really, really anxious to hear Culture Amp's take on, you can contact Ginny or I on LinkedIn. I'm juggling cats and a 6-year-old child in remote learning at the moment, so I might be a little longer to get back to you, but I would love to, hear any of your questions that we didn't get to today. And just to stay across the organizations that you're working in and building, especially if being culture first is something that is really important to you. We have this culture first community that you can become part of. If you go to cultureamp.com, you'll be able to find links to our community, which will also get you access to lots of great resources, communities of similar people who are motivated by creating people first and culture first organizations. Normally we do lots of in-person events as well, obviously not at the moment, but we're doing lots of work and bringing people together even virtually to support each other in navigating the pitfalls and the triumphs of prioritizing culture inside organizations. Thank you, Ginny, for being my partner in crime on this, as well as in my professional life. And thanks to LaunchFIC for organising this, and thanks to all of you for, being so engaged and being so keen to take away some learnings from this today.